In the first 6 months of life, it's normal for your baby to wake up regularly at night, but when do parents need to be concerned about their child's sleeping habits? So tell me, Dr. Rama, sleep is really important. What are the common issues that you come across when babies and children aren't sleeping?
Yeah, so sleep, we all can appreciate how much it impacts, and the impact is immediate. In the first 6 months of life, there's nothing like a perfect sleep pattern for the child because they're trying to mature their brain and get a routine. But in general, it's the duration of sleep that's very important in the first 6 months of life. They need about anything between 14 to 16 hours of sleep in the first 3 months of life. And from about 4 to 11 months of life, they need between 11 to 13 hours of sleep. After that, until you go to school, on a rough rule, you get about 11 to 13 hours. And kids above that, the school age kids need 9 to 11 hours of sleep. So the time you should be getting worried is either they're having less than 9 hours of sleep, that's a bit of a concern for a young child, or they're actually crying quite a lot, which could be unsettling as well. Even if the parent goes and tries to settle them, it's not settling. That's a bit of a concern. Or actually, if they're having breathing problems during sleep, that's a bigger concern. While you're asleep, everything becomes floppy, especially the muscles around your airways. And if there's a breathing trouble, that's much more prominent when you're asleep. So if you have any breathing problems or the duration of sleep is very less for that, outside the normal range, that's a bit of a concern. Even for an adult, we recommend 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and if an adult is constantly getting less than 5 hours of sleep, it's actually unsafe in the long term. So we have to be really watching for how long we're sleeping and the timing of sleep as well. Of course, it's not going to be fixed for shift workers, but in children, at least they don't have that as a problem. So the time that they go to sleep, particularly in this era of excessive screen time, we have to be very watchful how long they're sleeping, what time they go to sleep, and how is their breathing during sleep.
Because a lot of kids do breathe, sleep with their mouth open. That's not a very good sign, is it?
No. So actually, in fact, little kids, we call as obligate nasal breathers. That means they just can't breathe through their mouth. So if their nose is blocked, they're literally barely able to compensate with the mouth like you and me can do. So if their mouth is open when they're sleeping, either they have big adenoids, they're like your tonsils at the back of the nose, so that needs to be treated, or they could have polyps, especially if the child has got CF, or they could have lots of allergies where the mucosa gets bulky and they're not able to breathe well. Or in very small children, they could have what we call as choanal atresia, where the back of the nose is not formed well, and that could be the reason they're mouth breathing. Of course, when you have a cold, most of the time we're breathing through the mouth, that's normal. But if they're consistently doing without any infections, a mouth breathing, particularly snoring, having a big effort with breathing or struggling to breathe, that's always a concern and time to seek any medical attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can breathing issues affect sleep then? Because obviously, if you're not sleeping properly, you're not breathing properly, you're waking up a lot.
Yeah. So it's a close relation between breathing problems and sleep, as we spoke about. If you have breathing problems, they're more likely to manifest during sleep. And one of the common things that we see is the obstructive sleep apnea, where you have children snoring. About 7 to 10% of children on an average, even when they're well, are snoring. And out of them, 1 in 3 children who actually snore may have what we call as obstructive sleep apnea, where means you have the signals from the brain telling you to breathe, but your airway is blocked up and you're actually not having any airflow at all. Then the kid takes a long gasping breath to open the airway. But if you imagine, they're actually slightly awake, and that could be happening many times over the night. So it's much worse than reducing your sleep by a few hours. It's like someone trying to wake you up every few seconds. So that's obstructive sleep apnea, where you have signals to breathe, but your airway is obstructed and you're having to take a big breath. That's what we call as gasping breaths or apneas or choking and gagging. And that definitely impacts your daytime functioning. We do see now some children having what we call AHI, that's the apnea hypopnea index, the number of times they have this breathing problems per hour, 10, 20 per hour. So that many times actually they're struggling to breathe, and that you can imagine how much it impacts the next day. And we do see that as a big reason for behavior problems, being irritable, being angry, being out of control, and also an association with school performance coming down. So in those times, good to think, is your child snoring just when they have a cold? That is quite common, and that will go away. But if your child is snoring even when they don't have a cold, soon after falling asleep, or having those gasping breaths, they're very likely or possibly having sleep apnea, particularly if they're also having daytime tiredness, yawning constantly, having behavioral troubles. They could be because of big adenoids, which are there at the back of the nose, or big tonsils, or having those tonsils being inflamed and infected quite often. And some people, it could be because of obesity as well, because the fat deposits does narrow the passage for the airway. And some, unfortunately, their neural control, the tone is reduced for unknown reasons. Even a slim person with barely any tonsils could be having trouble with breathing during sleep as well. So those are the things to be looking for. Yeah.
And you have a new sleep clinic here in Townsville.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to see that for the first time we have a sleep service in North Queensland. We're able to do sleep studies at Mater Hospital to evaluate if someone has got any obstructive sleep apnea. Hopefully, eventually, we can get some in the public as well, so everybody can get access as well.
So there you have it. If your little one won't settle and go to sleep, or you're worried about their sleeping habits, definitely get in touch with the wonderful team at Townsville Paediatrics today. If your GP is ever wanting to refer your child to a paediatrician, though, ask them to refer you to the amazing team at Townsville Paediatrics.